You ever have one of those mornings where everything you thought you knew about life flips right on its head? Because man, let me tell you, one minute I was just a guy with an old pickup and a letter in my mailbox. The next, I was standing on a battlefield I didn't even know existed, staring down the queen of an HOA empire who had no idea she was living on borrowed ground. Literally. I guess you could say it all started with the sound of that Range Rover's horn slicing through the morning stillness. There I was, parking my 2010 Ford next to the mailbox. Nothing fancy, just reliable. And suddenly this shiny silver beast comes rolling up, boxing me in like she's done it 100 times before. And out steps Helena Whitmore. Yeah, the Helena Louis Vuitton heels diamond bracelet catching every scrap of sunlight, and that look on her face that says she's never waited for a table, much less for a nobody like me to get out of her way. I'm telling you, even her voice had that country club polish when she told me no. Asked me in that way rich people ask, that maybe my project truck would be more at home down at the trailer park. She actually slapped a bright orange sticker on my window. Vehicle does not meet community standards, like it was a warning label for the rest of her little fiefdom. Circumstances, she said, drawing out the word like it was something you'd catch from a dirty countertop. Maplewood Estates was her kingdom. 200 homes, not a blade of grass out of place, not a dog barking after 8 p.m. But as she strutted back to her Range Rover, the letter in my hand started to feel heavier. In her eyes, she clocked that letterhead real quick. Just for a second there was a flicker, like she'd seen a ghost. I didn't think much of it, not at first. But then I remembered my granddad's words, Jake, they might buy houses, but this land will always be Morrison land. Used to think he was just holding on to the past, but man, turns out old folks sometimes see further down the road than we do. That sticker was just the opening shot in Helena. She was the kind of person who never expected anybody to shoot back. But when she saw Morrison Estate Legal Affairs on that envelope, her hand trembled barely. But it did. She'd spent so long at the top, so sure she was untouchable. But one letter nearly made her lose her grip. That's the thing about folks who build their castles out of sand. They never imagine the tide might come in. I went home that night and for the first time used the brass key my grandfather left me to open up the old safe. You know, the one in the basement that's seen more secrets than a confessional. And what I found in there? Well, let's just say every single thing I thought I knew about this land and those houses went straight out the window. Turns out Pinnacle Development signed a 40-year lease with the Morrison family in '95. They built those houses, but they never owned the dirt under them. Lease expired in 2035, but here's the kicker. Pinnacle went belly up in 2005, stopped paying rent, never told a soul. Guess who was put in charge of managing all those messy details? Helena herself. As bankruptcy trustee, she was supposed to tell every buyer the truth. Instead, she sold homes like hotcakes, pocketed commissions, and kept everyone in the dark. You can't make this stuff up. These families, teachers, doctors, retirees, thought they'd bought their piece of the American dream. Put down $500,000, sometimes more, to live behind a gate, send their kids to the good schools, mow their lawns on Saturdays. Only problem. They were paying mortgage on a house sitting on land my family still owned, whether anyone liked it or not. And the road, the one winding through those hills connecting their exclusive enclave to the rest of the world, also Morrison land. Never leased, never sold, they didn't own it, not 1 inch. I spent that night poring over every document, every scribbled note in my grandfather's handwriting, realizing just how deep this rabbit hole went. By dawn, I'd mapped out every option: sue for back rent, and bankrupt Helena kick 200 families out and reclaim everything, or find a way to make it right without torching innocent lives. I circled the third cell, the access road. Not to Helena, not to the HOA, to the local hospital who'd been dying for an emergency route. $2 million for a strip of asphalt. Suddenly the balance of power shifted fast. Helena caught wind of it before I'd even finished signing the paperwork. She came knocking on my door, all, let's start fresh in legal complications, with some slick attorney in tow, waving a contract worth less than a third of the land's value. I almost laughed. All that sweetness. That was just her way of hiding the desperation. The moment I questioned the fine print, historic lease obligations, immediate transfer, her mask slipped. She went from honey to poison in 2 seconds flat. You'd think she'd back off, but nope. Next thing I know, I've got black SUVs tailing me, social media painting me as some unhinged hermit, even bogus police reports popping up. I started recording everything, every threat, every voicemail, every little bit of harassment. It only made her madder. The real tipping point was at the grocery store. She tried to rally the troops, 10 folks blocking my way to checkout, shouting about how I was destroying their homes. I just asked, "You mean your rented lots?" The silence that followed, you could hear a pin drop. Then I pulled out the survey offered to show anyone their deed. Folks started doing their own research. The whispers turned into a roar. "What do you mean we don't own the land?" It all blew wide open after I sold the road. The hospital put up barriers overnight. Range Rovers and Teslas backed up for miles, news crews swarming residents demanding answers. Helena tried to blame me on live TV, claimed I'd sold her road illegally. Only the county records didn't lie. Morrison property since 1952. When the dust settled, Helena tried one last play, $500,000 under the table if I'd just disappear. My answer, I forwarded her voicemail straight to the authorities. The community meeting that followed was a circus. Helena tried to sell herself as the victim, but I brought out the projector, slide after slide of documents, audio recordings, even her own voice admitting the cover-up. That's when Margaret, the retired teacher, finally snapped, "You let me buy a house on rented land." And David, the doctor, realized he'd mortgaged his future on a lie. The FBI stepped in right then and there. Handcuffs, Miranda rights, the whole 9 yards. On live TV, no less. Here's the twist. When the dust finally settled, I offered every family a shot to actually own their land. 30-year financing, 3% interest payments, about the same as what they'd been throwing at Helena for HOA fees. Most took the deal, a few moved on, but everyone got a fair shot, something they should have had from the start. 6 months later, Maplewood looked the same, but it felt different. No more exclusivity, no more pretense. Just neighbors, real owners calling out Morning Jake while kids played soccer on land that used to be just another page in my family's story. And me, I started the Morrison Truth Foundation with the money from the road sale and land deals, helping other families who'd been duped, just like we were. Turns out there's a lot of Helenas out there. But there's also a lot of us folks who know what's right and are willing to fight for it. Last week I got a letter from a retired teacher in Arizona. Same kind of scam, different state. "Mr. Morrison, we need your help." And you know what? For the first time in a long time, I looked at that old brass key and thought, yeah, Grandpa, we did good. So what's the lesson in all this? I guess it's this: never let yourself be bullied off. What's rightfully yours, no matter how shiny their car or fancy their words. Power built on lies will always crack under the weight of truth. Sometimes you just have to be the one willing to turn the key. But let me ask you this, if you were in my boots, would you have burned it all down for revenge or tried to save as many as you could, even after everything they put you through? Where's the line between justice and mercy? Especially when the law finally lands on your side. Drop your thoughts below, and hey, if you've ever had to stand up to folks like Helena, tell your story. There's a lot more of us out here than you might think.